For 7 years, Emma Carter had learned to recognize the difference between kindness and performance. Her mother-in-law, Victoria Langston, had perfected the art of pretending. To outsiders, Victoria was elegance wrapped in silk and diamonds, a graceful socialite with a warm smile and polished manners. She knew exactly how to charm a room, how to make people laugh, and how to appear like the perfect matriarch. But behind closed doors, Victoria's sweetness turned sharp. Emma had discovered that truth only weeks after marrying Daniel. At first, it had been subtle comments disguised as concern. "Are you sure that dress suits the occasion, dear?" Daniel has always had expensive tastes. Marriage can be quite intimidating for women from simpler backgrounds. You're trying your best, and that's what matters. Every word was carefully chosen to sound harmless, but every sentence carried the same message: you do not belong here. Emma had tolerated it for Daniel's sake. She loved her husband deeply. Daniel was kind, hardworking, and endlessly optimistic. He always believed his mother's harshness was accidental, that she simply had a difficult personality. "She doesn't mean it that way," he would often say. Emma wanted to believe him. For years, she smiled through the insults, ignored the exclusion, and attended every family gathering with her head held high. She endured being seated at the children's table one Christmas because Victoria claimed there wasn't enough room. She overlooked the anniversary party where Victoria introduced her as Daniel's lovely little wife, without mentioning Emma's own successful consulting career. And she stayed silent the day Victoria told a room full of guests that Emma was still learning how upper-class dinners work. Each humiliation was small enough to dismiss, but together they formed a mountain of quiet cruelty. Still, Emma kept hoping things would change. So when the cream-colored envelope arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon, her heart lifted. The invitation was embossed in gold lettering. The Langston family's annual anniversary celebration, hosted by Victoria and Charles Langston Lachate. Étoile Lachate, Étoile. Emma's eyes widened. The restaurant was legendary. It wasn't the kind of place people simply reserved. Tables were booked months, sometimes years in advance. It was the crown jewel of the city's fine dining scene, a place whispered about in luxury magazines and frequented by celebrities, politicians, and the city's wealthiest families. Emma had heard Daniel mention that his mother had been trying for years to secure a private booking there. "Wow," Daniel said as he read over her shoulder, "Mom must have gone all out this year." Emma studied the elegant script at the bottom. "We would be honored by your presence." Something about the wording felt strange. Victoria had never used the word honored when it came to Emma. Still, she forced a smile. Maybe this is her way of making peace. Daniel kissed her forehead. "I think so too." For the first time in a long while, Emma allowed herself to hope. The night of the dinner arrived cool and crisp, with the city glowing beneath strings of amber streetlights. Emma stood before the mirror in their bedroom, smoothing the deep emerald silk of her gown. The dress was simple yet elegant, fitted perfectly to her frame. She wore her dark hair in soft waves and chose understated pearl earrings. Daniel appeared behind her, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look stunning." Emma smiled faintly. "You think your mother will approve?" Daniel chuckled awkwardly. "You know, Mom, she'll find something to criticize." His attempt at humor did little to calm the knot in Emma's stomach. An hour later, their car rolled beneath the grand illuminated entrance of Lachate, Étoile. The building looked like a palace of glass and gold. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through towering windows, and valets moved with military precision. Inside, the restaurant glowed with candlelight reflected across polished marble floors. A hostess greeted them and led them through the main dining room toward an elegant private banquet hall. Emma's heels clicked softly against the floor as her anxiety grew. When they entered the room, every member of Daniel's family was already seated. Victoria sat at the center of the long table, draped in silver satin, her diamond necklace glittering like frost. Beside her sat Charles, her expressionless husband. Daniel's sister Claire lounged nearby, scrolling through her phone. Conversation hushed as Emma and Daniel approached. Victoria's lips curved into a practiced smile. "Daniel, darling, right on time." Then her gaze shifted to Emma. The smile cooled. Emma scanned the table, her breath caught. There were 8 place settings, 8 chairs, but 9 people in the room. Her eyes searched desperately. There was no chair for her. The empty space beside Daniel's assigned seat was glaringly bare. For a moment, Emma thought there had been some mistake. Surely the staff had forgotten. Then she noticed Victoria's expression. That tiny glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. It wasn't an accident. Victoria folded her napkin delicately into her lap. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Victoria tilted her head. "I only reserved seating for immediate family." Silence slammed into the room. Emma felt heat rush to her face. The words struck like a slap. Daniel looked stunned but said nothing. Not one person at the table spoke. Claire smirked. Charles stared down at his wineglass. Emma stood frozen, every humiliating family memory crashing over her at once. Victoria gave a light laugh. "I'm sure the lounge has room if Emma would prefer to wait there while we dine." The cruelty was surgical. Precise, public. Emma's chest tightened. She looked at Daniel, silently pleading for him to say something, anything. But his mouth opened and closed uselessly, and in that painful moment of his silence, Emma realized she was completely alone. Then suddenly, the kitchen doors burst open. A tall man in a pristine white chef's coat strode into the room, his sharp dark eyes scanning the table. The head chef, Chef Alessandro Morti himself, the legendary culinary genius rarely seen by guests. His eyes landed on Emma. His expression shifted instantly from confusion to shock. He stopped dead in his tracks. Then, in a voice loud enough for every person in the room to hear, he said, "Boss, why are you standing?" The silence that followed Chef Alessandro Morti's words was so absolute that Emma could hear the faint crackle of candle wicks burning across the room. For a moment, no one moved. Victoria Langston's polished smile froze on her face, as though her expression itself had forgotten how to function. Daniel stared at Emma, confusion spreading across his features. Claire lowered her phone, her usual smug indifference replaced by open disbelief. Emma stood perfectly still. She had imagined many ways this night might unfold. She had prepared herself for another subtle insult, another evening of swallowing humiliation for the sake of family peace. But she had not expected this. She certainly had not expected Alessandro to walk directly into the private dining room at that exact moment. The world-renowned chef moved toward her with calm, deliberate steps, his crisp white coat immaculate beneath the golden light of the chandeliers. There was authority in every inch of his posture. When he reached Emma, he offered a respectful nod. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "why has no one seated you?" His question landed like a hammer. Victoria gave a strained laugh, quickly recovering enough to force her usual elegant composure. "Oh, Chef Morty, there must be some misunderstanding." She waved one manicured hand dismissively. "This is simply a private family arrangement." Alessandro's dark eyes shifted to her. The chill in his gaze made Victoria's smile falter. "A private arrangement," he repeated. "Yes," Victoria said, straightening, This table was reserved for immediate family only. Alessandro's expression hardened. Then he spoke the words that shattered the illusion Victoria had so carefully constructed. "Ms. Emma Carter is not only welcome in this room," he said evenly. "She is the majority owner of this restaurant." The sentence struck the room like thunder. Claire gasped aloud. Charles nearly dropped his wineglass. Daniel's head snapped toward Emma, so fast she thought he might have hurt himself. "What?" he whispered. Victoria blinked rapidly, as though refusing to process what she had heard. "That's impossible." Emma inhaled slowly, finally finding her voice. "It's true." The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Victoria stared at her as if seeing a stranger. Emma had spent years allowing this family to underestimate her. She had never corrected their assumptions, never felt the need to parade her accomplishments. To Victoria, Emma had always been the modest woman from a middle-class upbringing who had somehow married into wealth. She had never bothered to ask who Emma really was. 3 years earlier, Emma's grandmother had passed away, leaving her a quiet inheritance. It wasn't old money on magazine covers wealth like the Langstons flaunted, but it was substantial enough to change her future. Emma could have bought designer homes, luxury cars, a life of effortless comfort. Instead, she invested. And when she learned that Étoile was facing financial collapse after a disastrous expansion attempt, she saw something others had missed. Potential. The restaurant had been drowning under debt, and Chef Alessandro had been days away from losing everything he had built. Emma had met him privately. He had expected another wealthy investor looking to strip the place for profit. Instead, he found someone who believed in his vision. She had offered enough capital to clear the debts, modernize operations, and stabilize the business. In return, she became majority shareholder, but she made one unusual request. Her ownership would remain confidential. No press releases, no public announcements, no mention of her name. She wanted the restaurant to succeed on its own merit, not because of headlines. Alessandro had honored that request, and together they had transformed Étoile into the city's most coveted dining destination. Emma had quietly overseen strategic growth, marketing partnerships, and financial restructuring while continuing her consulting work. The investment had flourished beyond anyone's expectations, yet she had never told Daniel. At first, she planned to surprise him. Then life became complicated. His own business struggled. His family's endless judgments consumed their marriage. And somehow, the right moment never came. Now the truth stood exposed beneath crystal chandeliers. Alessandro turned sharply toward the nearest server. "Bring a chair immediately." The staff moved without hesitation. Within seconds, 2 attendants arrived carrying an elegant high-backed velvet chair unlike any at the table. It was larger, more ornate, positioned with unmistakable significance. Alessandro personally pulled it back for Emma. "Your seat, Ms. Carter." Victoria's face drained of color. That chair wasn't part of this reservation. Alessandro's tone remained smooth, but carried unmistakable steel. "No, Mrs. Langston." He held Victoria's gaze. "It is reserved exclusively for the owner." The humiliation on Victoria's face was instant and devastating. For years, she had controlled every social interaction through status and carefully staged dominance. Now the very setting she had chosen to diminish Emma had become the stage for her own public embarrassment. Emma lowered herself gracefully into the chair. For the first time all evening, she felt completely calm. Daniel remained standing beside her, his expression caught somewhere between confusion and awe. "You own this place?" he asked quietly. Emma met his eyes. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" The question held no anger, only shock. Emma gave him a sad smile. I was waiting for a moment when it felt safe to share. The meaning landed harder than any accusation could have. Daniel's face fell. Across the table, Victoria attempted to regain control. "Well," she said stiffly, forcing a brittle smile, "this is certainly unexpected." Emma folded her hands neatly before her. Yes, her voice was soft, but then, so was finding my chair missing. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came. Before she could recover, Alessandro spoke again. "The owner's private dining suite has been prepared." He turned to Emma with formal respect. "Would you prefer to continue your evening there?" Emma glanced slowly around the table, at Victoria's pale, shaken face, at Claire's stunned silence, at Daniel's regret-filled eyes. Then she rose smoothly to her feet. "Yes," she said, "I think I would." And with every eye in the room fixed upon her, Emma Carter walked away from the table where she had been denied a seat, toward the place that had always belonged to her. The private dining suite at Château Étoile was unlike anything else in the restaurant. Hidden behind tall ivory, paneled doors, it was reserved for only the most exclusive guests, heads of state, international celebrities, and billionaire investors whose names filled business magazines. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling, casting warm light across polished mahogany floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, where thousands of lights glittered against the darkness like scattered stars. Emma had stood in that room many times before, yet tonight, stepping into it felt different. Tonight, she wasn't entering as a quiet investor reviewing quarterly numbers or discussing expansion strategies with Chef Alessandro. Tonight, she was walking in as herself, no secrets, no hidden titles, no carefully lowered expectations. The staff moved swiftly, preparing the suite for her arrival. Fresh candles were lit. Silverware was adjusted with precision. Alessandro himself pulled out the head chair at the long polished table. "Everything is ready, Ms. Carter," he said respectfully. Emma gave a small nod. "Thank you, Alessandro." As she sat, her pulse slowly steadied. For years, she had swallowed humiliation to preserve peace. Tonight, for the first time, she felt the power of silence broken. But she knew Victoria Langston would not let this humiliation pass quietly. She was right. The suite doors swung open less than 2 minutes later. Victoria stormed inside, her silver satin gown rustling sharply with each furious step. Behind her came Daniel and Charles, while Claire lingered near the doorway, clearly too curious to stay away. Victoria's carefully maintained elegance had cracked. Her cheeks were flushed crimson, and her polished smile had been replaced by something rawer, rage. "This has gone far enough," she snapped. The room froze. Emma remained seated, calm and composed. "Has it?" Victoria stopped across from her. "You deliberately humiliated me." Emma let the accusation hang in the air for a moment. Then she tilted her head slightly. Deliberately, her voice was soft, almost curious. "That's an interesting word, considering someone deliberately removed my chair." Victoria's jaw tightened. "That was a family matter." Emma's eyes sharpened. "No, Victoria. It was cruelty disguised as tradition." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should just stay out of this." Victoria snapped. Daniel fell silent. Emma noticed. And once again, disappointment pressed against her chest. Even now, he struggled to stand between them. Victoria leaned forward, her voice lowering. "You've embarrassed this family in front of everyone." Emma gave a faint smile. "No, I revealed the truth in front of everyone. There's a difference." Victoria's eyes flashed. "You let us believe you were insignificant." The irony of the statement nearly made Emma laugh. Instead, she folded her hands neatly on the table. "You never asked who I was." That struck deeper than any insult. For years, Victoria had judged Emma based solely on her modest upbringing. To her, Emma had been an outsider, a woman unworthy of the Langston name because she lacked inherited prestige. She had never considered that Emma might possess success entirely her own. Victoria straightened, grasping desperately for control. If this restaurant is yours, then why keep it secret? Emma looked directly at Daniel before answering. Because I learned long ago that some people only value what they can use. The words hit harder than she intended. Daniel's face fell. Victoria scoffed. This is absurd. No, Emma said evenly. What's absurd is pretending your approval was ever about family. The suite grew deathly still. Emma rose slowly from her chair. For years, she had imagined this moment, what she would say if she ever finally stopped protecting Victoria's reputation. Now the words came effortlessly. You mocked my background because my father was a schoolteacher and my mother worked double shifts as a nurse. Victoria said nothing. You treated me like an embarrassment because I didn't grow up attending charity galas and country clubs. Still silence. Emma took a step closer, and all the while I was quietly building something real. Victoria's expression wavered. Emma continued, when Daniel's company nearly collapsed 2 years ago, do you remember how suddenly his debts disappeared? Daniel looked up sharply. What? Victoria frowned. Emma turned to him. You told me not to interfere because you wanted to solve it yourself. Daniel's brow furrowed. Emma's voice softened, but I couldn't watch you lose everything. Understanding slowly dawned across his face. The anonymous investment, Emma nodded. It came from me. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. His company had been saved by a mysterious emergency investor who requested no recognition and accepted minimal returns. He had spent 2 years trying to discover who had rescued him. It had been his wife all along. Youth. His voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? Emma's eyes glistened. Because love isn't leverage. The words shattered whatever remained of Victoria's composure. She slammed her hand onto the table. This is manipulation. Emma turned sharply. No. Her voice was suddenly steel. What's manipulation is spending years convincing your son his wife was never enough. The accusation landed with brutal precision. Daniel looked at his mother, stunned. Victoria opened her mouth, but no defense came. Emma faced him fully. She told you I wasn't suited for your world. She told you I'd hold you back, and every time she humiliated me, you asked me to stay quiet for the sake of peace. Daniel's face crumpled under the weight of truth. He had known, not fully, not consciously, but deep down he had known. And he had chosen silence. Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You removed my chair tonight because you thought I didn't belong. She looked directly at Victoria. But the truth is, her gaze swept across the room. None of this would exist without me, and no one spoke. Not Victoria, not Charles, not Claire, not even Daniel. For the first time in years, Victoria Langston had no words. And standing beneath the golden light of the private suite she had unknowingly entered as a guest, she finally understood what true humiliation felt like. The silence inside the private dining suite stretched so long it became unbearable. Victoria Langston stood motionless at the center of the room, her carefully crafted image of superiority hanging by a thread. The sharp confidence she had worn like a crown for decades was gone. In its place stood something far more fragile, panic. Emma could see it clearly. For the first time in 7 years, Victoria had lost control, and she had lost it publicly. Outside the suite's ivory, paneled doors, the restaurant buzzed with quiet sophistication. The city's elite continued their dinners, unaware that one of the most powerful social figures in town was unraveling just beyond the walls. Victoria's lips parted as though she might speak, but no sound came. Finally, Daniel stepped forward. His face looked pale, almost haunted. as if the weight of everything he had failed to see had settled heavily on his shoulders. "Emma," he said softly. There was regret in his voice, real regret, but Emma did not answer immediately. She had spent years waiting for him to speak up, for him to defend her, to challenge his mother, to choose his marriage over convenience. Tonight his apology felt overdue. Across the room, Chef Alessandro entered quietly. Behind him stood several members of the restaurant staff, followed by a group of elegantly dressed guests, investors, business leaders, and media representatives Emma recognized instantly. This had been planned for weeks. Tonight wasn't just Victoria and Charles's anniversary dinner. It was also Lachate, Étoile's private expansion announcement. Emma had intended to reveal her ownership to a select circle of influential partners after dinner. Victoria's cruel little stunt had simply moved the schedule forward. Alessandro addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly, "thank you for joining us for this evening's special presentation." The guests entered fully, murmuring greetings. Several of them immediately approached Emma. One by one, they shook her hand with respect. "Congratulations, Ms. Carter. The city has been buzzing about your expansion plans. An extraordinary achievement." Victoria watched in stunned horror. These were people she had spent years trying to impress. And they were honoring Emma. A large digital display illuminated at the far end of the suite. Across the screen appeared the words, "Lachate, Étoile International Expansion." Below it, a second line followed. "Founder and Executive Chairwoman, Emma Carter." A collective murmur swept through the room. Emma rose gracefully and stepped toward the display. For years, she had hidden her accomplishments because she believed dignity did not require applause. But tonight was different. Tonight was not about pride, it was about truth. 3 years ago, Emma began, her voice calm and clear. This restaurant was days from collapse. The room listened in perfect silence. "I invested because I believed excellence deserved a second chance." She glanced briefly at Alessandro, who nodded respectfully. "Together we rebuilt Lachate, Étoile, into what it is today." The screen changed, revealing architectural renderings of 2 stunning new luxury locations, one in Dubai, the other in Paris. Gasps rippled through the guests. Emma continued, "Tonight, I'm proud to officially announce our global expansion." Applause filled the room. Victoria stood frozen, her face draining of all color. The woman she had dismissed as ordinary was now commanding the attention of some of the most powerful people in the city. Then Emma turned toward Daniel. The room quieted instantly. "There is one more announcement." Daniel looked stunned. Emma held his gaze. "When Daniel's company faced collapse 2 years ago, I stepped in because I believed in him." He swallowed hard. Emma's expression softened. "I still believe in the man I married." She gestured toward the screen, where a final title appeared. Strategic Development Director, position offered to Daniel Carter. The room erupted into surprised applause. Daniel stared at the display, speechless. Emma stepped closer. "This position is yours," she said quietly, "if you choose to earn it, not through family connections, not through pity, but through integrity." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. He nodded slowly, "I will." Then, in front of everyone, he turned to her fully. "I failed you." His voice cracked. "I let my silence hurt you because I was too afraid to challenge my mother." The room remained still. "I should have protected you. I should have stood beside you." Emma studied his face. For the first time, she saw no hesitation there. Only honesty. Then Victoria suddenly stepped forward. "This is absurd," she hissed. Her voice was desperate now. "You can't seriously reward him after humiliating this family." Emma turned to face her, and in that moment, every ounce of quiet endurance she had built over 7 years became unshakable strength. She smiled. "A chair can be removed from a table," she said calmly. The words echoed through the suite. "But respect cannot." Victoria's face twisted. Emma gave Alessandro a slight nod. The chef understood immediately. He stepped forward. "Mrs. Langston," he said politely, effective immediately. "Your lifetime reservation privileges at all Le Château. Our Étoile properties have been revoked." Victoria's mouth fell open. "What? This decision is final." Two staff members approached discreetly. The humiliation was absolute. Victoria looked desperately toward Charles and Claire, but neither moved. Even they understood the battle was over. Without another word, she was escorted from the suite, and as the doors closed behind her, the room exhaled. Months later, Daniel accepted the position and proved himself through relentless hard work. Their marriage was rebuilt not on silence, but on honesty. Victoria's influence faded quickly in social circles once her behavior became known. And every year after that, on the anniversary of that unforgettable dinner, Emma sat at the head of Le Château, our Étoile's grandest table, her chair waiting, her place unquestioned, her victory complete.